Okay, let's see if this is live here. First time. Okay. Says live. Let's see. Okay, awesome. For those of you in there right now, I got to post this on LinkedIn real quick just because I know the link probably wasn't super easy. There was no invite for me to send out, so bear with me. Oh, that's kind of cool. Sweet. You guys are witnessing me firsthand figure this out. Sometimes you just got to take action and break things along the way. So it's going to be clunky. Okay, cool. So I think the cool thing is this should be getting recorded, and so this will end up on my page. It's 4:03 on a Friday afternoon, so this will be casual. I've got a big list of 50 questions. I'm going to read through. I have not read them already, so I'll be reading through them live here. Some of them will be applicable. Some of them will not. So these honestly range from just general career questions. Some of them are specific to their functions, which I would say I'm not qualified to answer. So I'll let some other people that are in the network answer. And then if I can't get through all of them, this is something that I'm going to be doing more moving forward. So we'll just kick it off with a good one here. Really common. So I'm a senior auditor at a Big Four firm. How do I move to FP&A without starting as a junior analyst or taking a 20% pay cut? My advice here, the simple answer is don't go directly into FP&A. Go into accounting at that company. So I know that obviously there are plenty of companies that you can go directly from Big Four to an FP&A role. And FP&A roles, they look different at different companies. Some companies call FP&A actual accountants. So for an actual financial planning and analysis role, the easiest way to get into that type of position without taking a pay cut is honestly just join the accounting team of that company. It'll help you in the long run too, because you'll get to know the accounting of the business, and then you can go and actually do more forward-looking, more strategic, quote unquote, fun activities. So that's the short answer. If you want to go directly into an FP&A function and skip the accounting, you'll probably have to come up with different use cases that you've seen as an auditor and how those skill sets are going to let you step directly into that FP&A type role. Next question is, and I hope you guys can hear me okay. If you can, just put like a thumbs up or some weird thing in the chat. I can't see that on my end. Accounting versus finance. Is it better to start in public accounting for the pedigree or go straight into a financial leadership development program / FP&A role? That's a great question. And I'm going to say it depends a lot today. So I think public accounting is a fantastic foundation to get into. You get to see different industries, you get to see different size of companies, different situations, how different things are run. So it's never a bad idea if you want to stay in the finance world to have a public accounting foundation. That said, going into a financial leadership development program, assuming it's with a large company, you get to see so many different areas of the business and get a good understanding of what those roles look like inside of a company versus kind of theorizing about it as an auditor. So either path is fine. I think I would favor the public accounting experience if you do have aspirations to be a financial leader one day. But you're going to be okay going into either one. I would say, to give you a straight answer, public accounting over the FLDP, as this person put it. Okay, this is a fun one. I'm 35 plus and coming from an unrelated field. Is it too late to start in accounting, and will I ever catch up in salary? Short answer is no, it is not too late, and you will catch up in salary. Right now, accounting is something that there's less and less people going into it from an educational standpoint. It's been going on for a long time. And so when it comes to catching up on comp, if you are a hard worker, right, it's going to take you a while to get through the educational piece. And I would, if you're going to do it, I would recommend getting the CPA too. It helps unlock so many different doors. And if you're worried about compensation and maximizing it, it's just something that will help you in the long run. So you're definitely not too late. It's one of those amazing careers that a lot of people go back and they do. I've seen a lot of people do it as a second career. And so it's something that is definitely worthwhile if you're looking for something that is stable, that is growing. There's always a demand for accountants right now. The vast majority of our projects this year were on the accounting side, just traditional blocking and tackling accounting type roles. And with AI, and there's plenty of questions in here about this, so I'll probably talk about it a little bit, but with AI, there's a big opportunity in the sense of it's not as important. The educational piece doesn't become as much memory and working knowledge as it does being technologically savvy. So it's not that AI is going to replace accountants. It's accountants using AI that's going to replace accountants. And again, I know there's a question in here about that, but ultimately AI just helps you do the mundane, the blocking and tackling faster. I don't think it's a good thing that it gets entirely removed, because financial leaders have that kind of sixth sense that when something's wrong, they know it's wrong because they kind of paid their dues, so to speak. So long story short, you're not too late to start in accounting. It's actually a pretty good time to do it. And you will catch up in salary because there will be a growing demand for those types of professions. Okay. How do I stop being seen as just the tax/audit person so I can get a seat at the strategic table? So this is a great question because I'm trying to figure out what shoulder it is, but my book right here talks a lot about that. Right? It's the whole reason I wrote it, because in so many conversations that I've had, people just want to list out like, hey, I did this, 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 and this. It's all, they're listing off the tasks that they've completed and like the what's behind what they did, and never about why they did it, right? What business outcome they were actually driving towards. So if you want to stop being seen as the tax and audit person, start asking questions about the business as a whole. Start understanding how the sales team moves, how the marketing team moves, how operations moves, right? Like understand the intricacies of the business, ask different questions at a high level that are in line with the strategic vision of the CEO. And you'll find yourself at having different conversations with them and hopefully one day at that table. Is it true that government accounting experience is a death sentence for moving into high growth corporate roles? It depends. The clear-cut answer is yes. From what I've seen, if you spend a lot of your career in government accounting and nonprofit, in those very, very specific accounting subsets, it is much harder for you to transition into a for-profit large corporate organization. What you might be able to do is, if you only have government experience, you could get a job at a smaller public accounting firm that now you're getting for-profit experience with, and then transition into a corporate role. But like the straight cut answer to, is government accounting a death sentence in moving into a high growth corporate role? That answer, I believe, firmly would be yes, just because I see it a lot. People reach out to me from higher education, from government, from nonprofit, and that's the only experience they have, and they're trying to transition. It's just really tough. So my advice normally is, that's something that you kind of have to network your way into. Company isn't going to pay a recruitment fee to get somebody who doesn't have a ton of experience in the industry or industry adjacent for a critical role that they need. So just honestly, my direct 2 cents on that. What are the most future-proof industries for finance professionals in 2026? SaaS versus manufacturing versus healthcare. That's a really good question. Most future-proof industries. And again, I didn't read these questions, guys, so bear with me while I think of this on the fly here. Obviously, I don't think tech's going anywhere. Anything energy related, because obviously like AI uses up a ton of energy. I almost swore here. I don't know if I can swear on YouTube Live. Probably not. I don't know. We'll try not to. Sometimes it just comes out though. Anything supporting the power grid, anything construction related that is building those data centers. Manufacturing, I think, will be very future proof, just because I think a lot of incentives are to bring manufacturing back to the US. Healthcare, certainly future proof. The only ones that, anything that would be going away would be like where you're completely taking the human out. But I'm of the mind that AI is making humans' lives more easier. Just getting rid of the mundane. It's going to make us more efficient if you use it correctly, and hopefully like don't outsource your thinking. It should help you make decisions faster, or take those kind of blocking and tackling tasks and automate it. So I don't know if I have any ones that I would specifically say stay away from, at least off the top of my head right now. But the really future-proof ones would be any of those that go into building the data centers and building anything related to supporting AI. If AI is the gold rush, then I would be looking at the different industries that are selling, pickaxes, shovels, that sort of analogy. Should I get an MBA to pivot into finance if I already have a CPA, or is that redundant? It's not redundant. I think the MBA is great if you want to get that general business knowledge, like marketing, finance. I don't have an MBA, so I don't know all the different areas that goes into it. I think a real life MBA is just as good, so to speak. So like, instead of getting an MBA to get into finance, I would talk to your manager, your team members that have say over the projects that you're working on, and see if you can work on some of the FP&A related duties. So like helping out with scenario planning, helping out with budgeting, helping out with any of the FP&A related tasks that you should know. If you're in the company as an accountant, you probably know the financials inside and out, and therefore you should offer to help and get more exposure to those types of experience. So yeah, instead of going and getting an MBA, I would just start with trying to get the practical experience first, and then you might be able to move over into that role or into that function altogether. Kind of goes hand in hand with the question earlier, where it's a lot easier just to, if you're coming from Big Four, if you're coming from a traditional accounting background, try to get the experience first, and then you can justify moving full-time into that function. Okay. Does starting at a small local firm permanently cap your career earnings compared to the Big Four? These are all really good questions. If I'm going to give a straight answer, probably yes, unfortunately. Starting in a Big Four, if you take that, there are certain paths you can go. If you start at a small firm locally and you move your way into a private equity backed company, and you're at a controller to CFO level where you get equity, then your earning potential is still just as good if you started within the Big Four and you go a route where you don't end up being the CFO of a publicly traded company. So brings us back to the answer I said I was going to give multiple times. It all depends on the route that you're able to take your career. This actually plays well to the next question I'll get into here in a minute. But just to wrap up that thought, like starting the Big Four, it's definitely advantageous because you can probably transition into a large publicly traded company that'll probably give you stock options that if you stick with a company and it's good, they're going to vest. And if the company has growth plans and executes on it, that's obviously a way to make a really good living. If you start a small local firm and again, you do really well, you continue to grow your career, you get into a controllership position, maybe that company gets bought by private equity, maybe you network really well and you can find your way, you can network your way into a private equity backed situation where the company does really well and it sells and you get a slice of that pie. It's going to be similar on the compensation front. So again, this ties really well into the next question here. So through the lens of career pivots, what would be your advice for someone looking to move from the public company space to a private equity portfolio company? Any call outs on risk, upside to that career move based on your experience and interactions would be helpful. Again, really good question here. So moving from public company to a private equity portfolio, just generally speaking, number one, that's a really fun move. It's fundamentally different because I've never worked in a big, like, I guess partially I have. In a big public company, things are going to move a lot slower. There's a lot more red tape. There's a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more politics at play. In a private equity backed portfolio company, the pace is significantly faster. And so you've got to be prepared. People are going to be asking you for things constantly, and they're going to want them. It needs to be perfect almost every time. At the level that you're at, right? So this person is 20 years in progressive finance roles, all within public companies. The level that you're at, it's almost better because so I have a lot of CFOs that come to me. They're like, "Hey, Alec, how do I become a private equity backed CFO at a portfolio company?" And the answer is be a private equity backed CFO at a portfolio company, which is the cheeky way of saying private equity shops look for people who have the experience already. So how do you make this jump? What's the best plan of attack here and the risk and upside? So the upside I hope is apparent. Most people know, like, if you get into a higher level finance role within a private equity backed company, a lot of times you're going to be incentivized with a little bit of equity so that if and when the company sells and hits their goal, their multiple on EBITDAs, you get a slice of that pie. You're incentivizing really smart, really good people to grow the company 5 to 15 to 20 to 25 to however many X, and then you reward them based on that. The trade-off is you're working crap ton of hours. And it's just in a different, you might not necessarily have as much help as you would have in a large public organization. Things aren't necessarily built out and supported as well as what you're used to. Cash, the company could also fail, right? Like if it's a lower level PE backed company, cash flow could become an issue. The thesis could just not pan out. And therefore you don't get the equity slice. You might be getting less guaranteed cash compensation. So base bonus like that. The way that it's structured, your base might be smaller than what it's used to in a big public company. But what's really exciting about this is, again, if you get in at like the middle level, we'll call it, so controller, director type level, you can now say the most important thing that private equity groups are looking for, which is you have proven private equity experience. When private equity groups are hiring, they're not looking for potential. They're not looking for hypothetical. They're looking for a resume that shows that you've owned the P&L, that you have quantifiable deliverables, right? Like you've gotten stuff done. Again, PG way to put it. You've actually moved the ball forward. You've created enterprise value that resulted in when they sold the company, they got more for what they put in. So how you approach this is reverse engineer what you're doing now. Look at your experiences, look at what you've done to this point, and start building that quantifiable bank, that finance impact narrative, as I call it, to show how you've managed an outcome that was given to you as a goal. Right? You do that, you network strategically within your marketplace with other people that are connected, all within the centers of influence, bankers, lawyers, attorneys, executive search professionals, people who are talking to end users, the end private equity groups, right? People running portfolio companies. And that is how you can hopefully get that first shot. So make sure I got everything in that question. Yeah, I think that's everything I would say about that one. Again, I think it's just because I've had so many CFOs ask me, how do I get into a PE-backed CFO type role? The answer is like, how can we highlight as much as possible the amount of times that you've owned and managed a process from start to finish based on the goal and the thesis that the private equity group would have? Right? Like, how can we make that transferable experience very relevant for them? Okay. Can you realistically move from FP&A into investment banking or private equity, or is that a one-way street? I'm not as qualified to answer this. I don't place a lot of people, or I haven't placed a lot of people in investment banking or private equity. I place more people into the private equity portfolio company versus the group itself, although I have placed people in PE groups themselves. I think it's probably pretty hard just because those worlds are relatively different. FP&A, you're kind of focused on just one business and you're focused on similar but different things. Investment banking, private equity, a lot more going on, much faster paced, much different networks. So yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that one with a lot of confidence, but that's my 2 cents would be that it's pretty much a one-way street. It's pretty hard to do that. Okay, how many years of experience do I need before I can successfully go solo as a fractional controller or CFO? That's a great question, because that is, you post fractional controller CFO on LinkedIn or anywhere, you're going to have a good response. So of being an actual controller to go off on your own, so that's, I don't know, what would that be? 17 years of experience, maybe total, 15 to 20 years, broadly speaking, depending on the experience that you got, right? Because you can have 5 years of experience where you do the same thing every single day and don't grow at all. Or you can have 2 years. You can have 2 years of work, but have 5 years of experience doing work in that 2-year time frame. Hopefully that makes sense. CFO, probably about the same. Fractional CFO. Fractional CFOs are different because you can call yourself a fractional CFO and you can just be a specialist in one specific area. So you can be an expert in capital raising. You can be an expert in M&A. You can be an expert in a couple of those different areas where you're brought in. The key is that you're brought in to solve a very specific problem of the business, versus where a controller, it's like, controller is pretty cut and dry in terms of the basic blocking and tackling. Fractional CFOs are normally brought in to do that more higher level strategic work, which is normally going to fall into one of those different categories that they focus on. Okay, let's see here. I've been a senior financial analyst / manager for 5 years. What is the one skill set that actually moves you to director? So this one's relatively easy. To get to director, like, the technical skills are pretty much table stakes. When it comes to getting into the C-suite, director level, VP level, it's really more of a mindset shift, which is a super lame answer because there's not much that we can really dive into there. But it comes down to, and I said it before, understanding the business. And it's not a sexy answer. It's understanding the inside and out of how the company creates value for its customers and optimizing the heck out of all of those different areas to drive top line revenue and to make the operation as efficient as possible to maximize EBITDA. Again, it's not a sexy answer. I don't love giving that, but I think that's the best answer I'm qualified to give because I am not a director of FP&A. So I'm not going to be telling you how to master certain technologies or anything like that. This is kind of similar to that. How do I improve my executive presence when I'm naturally an introvert who prefers spreadsheets to boardrooms? I think that's probably a question that a lot of people resonate with. And so, executive presence, my take on it. So, being an introvert is again, in my take, a superpower because introverts have the ability to have a lot of depth to them, right? And understanding. And when they're in a conversation, to be fully present and ask a lot of questions. The introvert's dilemma is really, it's a mindset shift from worrying about what to say next instead of rather just listening intently and then responding to what the other person just said with a meaningful question on that. If you do that, you're going to be surprised. People are going to think you're an extrovert because you're going to be asking so many questions and genuinely trying to understand where they're coming from. So with that, in improving executive presence, that mindset shift is number one. Keeping a very calm demeanor, right? If you're watch any of the business movies out there, you see a lot of people like CEOs screaming, lose their heads, stuff like that. I think more often than not, executives have a very calm, slow, and intentional presence. So that is like the actual physical presence of it is just slow down, speak clearly, speak slowly, speak plainly. There's no point in trying to sound smarter than you are. Like the biggest business jumps that I've seen is when people start just speaking clearer and stop trying to be clever. But then alongside of that, and I said this before, just understand the 3 KPIs or the top 3 or 5 that drive your business and know everything you can about them, right? So how do we add value for our customers? Who are our ideal clients? Who do we provide the most value to? And then what are all the different steps that your sales team and your operations team do to get customers, retain customers, and delight them so that they stay around and tell their friends about them? Right? That's like the super broad strokes. But like just it comes back to understanding the business fundamentals and doing everything you can to be up to speed on your industry, on your business, and how the greater economy are really affecting your business. Okay. What's next here? This is kind of similar, but this is a good question too. How do you handle managing up to a CEO who doesn't understand GAAP or financial constraints? I think you manage up by, you got to put it in terms of what he or she is going to care about. So whatever their goal is, and you're going to know it best. I'm assuming this person is a financial leader. Understand what their main priorities are, understand what they care about, understand what they're obsessing over. I think a lot of CEOs, presidents can get really driven on a certain initiative that they have, which I totally get. So just put it in their terms of what you're trying to relay and how it affects their end goal, right? So whatever their end goal is, present your situation, problem, solution in a way that is going to show them how that is going to help them reach their end goal quicker, cheaper, and with less pain. How do I spend less time in the weeds of the month-end close and more time on high-level strategy? That's a great question. The simple answer is you need to get your financial close to 5 days or less. And you need to be you need to have a financial close checklist. You need to have assigned job duties for each member of your team so that everyone knows what they're responsible for throughout the close process and leading up to the close process. And then you need to be optimizing that as much as you can. So if you don't, one thing that's really beneficial is just like, number one, have the checklist. Number two, have a mind map or just a visualization of the actual close process itself, so you can see step by step what you're doing. So have one rectangle here, and then have one rectangle on the other end. So you'll have start, you'll have end, and then fill out each and every step that goes into closing the books each month. And then have a arrow pointing to each step and list who's responsible for that step. And then just don't list what you want it to be, list what it is first. And then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to see the areas of optimization that will help you get close faster. You cannot just drop technology onto a broken process. You need to first establish the process itself. And then from there, now you can add technology to it, because you have to understand how it works before you can add anything to make it go faster. Oh, this is a really good one. Okay. Should I take a CFO title at a tiny startup or a director title at a Fortune 500? Which looks better? Which looks better later? Why would it look better later? Okay. First and foremost, it depends. Depends on what you want. Depends on what you enjoy. Broadly speaking, it also depends on what this tiny startup CFO is actually doing. If they're doing every aspect of the job, then it's not a bad idea, because you get exposure to all those different areas, right? So treasury, FP&A, accounting, risk. My direct answer would be take the Fortune 500, the director of the Fortune 500, get that experience. And then you take that experience and you parlay it into a more meaningful CFO title. And that more meaningful CFO title could just be like a lower middle market CFO. And that could be private equity backed, that could be family held. You can take the director at a Fortune 500 and drop back into a middle market company. It's very hard to take a lower level, tiny startup CFO and then step into a Fortune 500 at a meaningful capacity, right? You would have to go CFO at tiny startup and then go into like a controller, assistant controller, FP. It all depends on there. I need more context here, but it depends on the size of the tiny startup. It depends on who the Fortune 500 is, because what could happen is it depends on the experience that you'll be able to get at the Fortune 500. I would hope that you get broad exposure and have that overarching responsibility instead of being very pigeonholed, which in those roles, it's harder to get pigeonholed at the director title, at least. Earlier on in Fortune 500s, you can definitely get stuck where you're just doing one repetitive task over and over again. So easy, like the actual answer, director, just because I think there's more things you can parlay it into, and just different career paths you can take versus maybe pigeonholing yourself at that tiny startup if one day your aspiration is to get into a Fortune 500 company. If it's not to get into a Fortune 500 company, I would look at them a little bit more evenly, because the CFO title at a tiny startup gives you such good exposure. You could probably move that into other middle market and lower middle market companies. So again, it depends, but general thoughts on the matter. Okay, so what should a new VP of Finance prioritize in their first 90 days to win over the CEO? Kind of answered this already. Ultimately, to win over the CEO, get as many quick wins as you possibly can in the first 90 days. I think you do that by understanding the business exactly where it is today, not where you want it to be, not where the optimized version looks like. Where are they right now? What does the finance function currently look like? How are they valued within the business? What reports are they getting to the CEO? What is he actually using? And then from that, focus on what he or she really cares about, and then give them more of what they want and less of what they're not actually using. So see this all the time. new financial leader gets in an organization and they are the first couple of days, first couple of weeks, understanding the business, right? Asking a lot of questions, meeting every other functional leader within the company to understand what their priorities are, right? But then you need to understand, okay, what are we actually getting to the CEO right now? What actually matters to the business based on my understanding from the conversations with the other functional leaders? And then from there, if no one's using any of the other reports that you're putting out, simply get rid of those reports, because a lot of times, like, it's better to get rid of things than adding more things. It's a beautiful thing when you can reduce mental bandwidth on a lot of key people in your organization. This is relevant. Is Excel still king of 2026, or is Python/SQL now a must-have for any serious finance professionals? Excel is 100% still king in my mind. Every team we talk to, no matter big or small, they're always using Excel. So it's still king. We'll see. Maybe I get this question again in a year. It's 2027. Maybe it's changed. I doubt it, but we'll see. I think one day someone will replace it. But right now, Excel is still king. I think Python, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, those are all very much nice to haves. I think as a serious finance professional, I don't know if I think you have to have Python or SQL. I think those are definitely huge pluses. SQL for sure to run different queries. And I guess I just hear SQL more than I hear Python. My finance professionals using at least. Power BI, Tableau, data visualization tools. I think those are awesome to have, as well as what I think we're going to get into here in a minute. I see them coming up. Some more AI related tools. Okay. So here's a great question I touched on earlier. Will AI actually replace staff accountants, or will it just change the nature of entry level work? That's a really good question. I think it's not going to fully replace staff accountants, although there are plenty of entry level accounting finance professionals struggling to get jobs right now. And I totally sympathize with that. I couldn't even imagine what I would be feeling if I was like just now graduating and looking at my first job. Ultimately, I said it before, and I'll say it again, accountants who use AI will replace accountants, just not AI in and of itself. So spending some time to understand how the different softwares play into each other and how a finance function overall operates will give entry-level accountants an advantage over other entry-level accountants who do not have that fundamental understanding. I think that the manual work will still need to be done, and these entry-level accountants will be doing something. They won't be doing the hard coding in that accountants have done for the previous years of that profession. I think that will change. Because they don't have experience, because they are assuming we're talking about a brand new person into their first job. It's not like they can check to make sure that AI produced the right item. It's really more of it's having that fundamental understanding of what should come out, working with. It almost comes down to the mentorship of the financial leaders in the organization to pass along what looks right and why it looks right, to allow entry-level accountants to monitor what's coming out of what will eventually be that AI infused entry-level data coding, hard coding process. So long explanation, short answer is it will just change the nature of entry-level work, is what I believe. Someone wants to stay in corporate finance. Is Power BI/Tableau worth learning, or is well-formatted Excel deck still the industry standard? This is easy. Power BI/Tableau is 100% worth learning, but still be really good in Excel. Is the extra year of school for the CPA still worth the debt, or should I just go into FP&A without it? If your goal is to just stay in FP&A and never do anything accounting related like that, then yeah, you don't need to get the CPA per se, or depending on the size of organization you want to work with. I'm biased. I still keep my CPA active years after I was using it day to day. So I think if you want to maximize your career earnings, it's probably worthwhile. But at the same time, like depending on the size of organization, it's not something that you have to be successful. What are the biggest mistakes people make when building a 3-statement model? That is not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to answer that one. Why do most ERP migrations fail, and how can finance lead the project successfully? This is the trillion-dollar question. It's something we see frequently, where I just had lunch today with a couple of guys, and we had a really good conversation around this. And ERP migrations fail. There's some crazy stat. I need to memorize it because I talk about it so much. ERP migrations fail over 70% of the time. I would love to see the average cost of an ERP too. What is it like? It's at least 2 to 3 million, and obviously much more for bigger organizations. Never bought one, so obviously I don't know the full cost. But it fails because I think ERP migrations fail because you don't have finance involved enough, right? So what will happen? What I constantly hear is finance was not involved, did not have a meaningful stake in the implementation and integration initially. And then what happened was the super technical ERP implementation team that is very well versed in the technology itself and not well versed in accounting and finance implements it the way that they believe that it should be set up. However, no one from finance was consulted. And therefore, the people who are trying to pull the reports from finance and use it day to day to get the information to pass along to senior leadership to make decisions, they're not able to do it because it's not set up properly. So how can they lead the project successfully? Get more of your team, of your end users involved in the project itself. This was one of our most common projects in 2025 under our consulting arm for accounting and finance. What we did was our clients would come to us and say, hey, we are doing implementation of XYZ, or we're doing phase 2 of XYZ. Our controller is being requested to be there 60% of the time. We need one of your people just to backfill the day-to-day roles. And so one of our consultants would go in, handle the blocking and tackling while their internal controller, or whatever title it was spending the vast majority of their time making sure that the end result of the ERP being implemented or phase being updated was actually something that would be useful to them when pulling the reports that they wanted. That's a fun question. Love that one. So just get finance more involved. It's hard. It's a big demand on your people because now they have 2 jobs, right? They have their full daytime job and they have their ERP upgrade or implementation, right? So shameless plug, call me if you're dealing with that. That is like literally the easiest thing we can do is just drop someone in and get rid of the headache. But get that, regardless of what you do, get your team involved because they're the ones who are using it. In the end, they should be connecting all the dots from all the other functions, working with the other functions from a business partner standpoint around what's actually important to them. So it's only a good thing to have them involved. Okay. End rant. This is a really good question. Oh my gosh. Okay. If you could only teach a new hire one non-technical skill, what would it be? If you could only teach a new hire one non-technical skill, what would it be? How to have conversations with people in different functions without having any agenda to it, right? Meet with other people in the business, recurring theme established already. Meet with other people in different functions of the business, hear what they have going on, hear what problems they're facing, hear what they're moving towards, and get to know them. It makes the culture better. It makes business move faster. It helps other people uncover issues that might be coming down the pike that haven't been exposed yet. And as you, the accounting and finance professional, it allows you to start building some influence within the company by being somebody who's well networked and understands a lot of the different initiatives that are going on cross-functionally. I mean, that's a great question. Yeah. Should automate. Okay. I don't know if I'm the expert on this, but it's a really good question. What's the first thing an overworked accounting team should automate to save 10 hours a week? What I've seen our clients do, they normally start with the transactional. So first thing an overworked accounting team should automate: AP, AR, payroll. Then I would start looking at the different areas of the close. And I wouldn't even, if it's an overworked accounting team, I would just start with that transactional piece. And then from there, you can get into more sexy, so to speak, FP&A, stuff like that. All right, we got like 13 minutes left here. 13 minutes left. We're on question 31. So this is actually a lot of fun. So we'll be back here. I'll have to check my calendar, but hopefully next Friday, same time. What specific roles or industries pay $200,000 plus without requiring 80-hour work weeks? Specific role. Okay, so the roles themselves, they're going to be higher level. That's a really good question with the tricky part of without requiring 80-hour work weeks. So we're talking about higher level. We're going to be talking about higher level specialized roles. So higher level accounting, FP&A, tax, M&A, corporate development. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I kind of stepped away from the mic there, just brainstorming. The industry, so tech's a given. Manufacturing, also a given. Inside a larger organization, right? Middle market, lower middle market, probably not going to crack that. This also, it's going to depend on your geography. Like Cleveland, for a smaller company, a CFO title is going to be 200 to 300, depending on the size of the organization. Obviously, those are like smaller, lower middle markets. When you're bigger, obviously, they're much more. If we're talking about pure, like a 9 to 5, still making that type of money, you're going to be at a bigger company and you're going to be in one of those specialized areas. So yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I mean, it's kind of just like, it's what you would expect. So stick to the high growth industries like software and manufacturing and try to specialize in one of those specific areas, or continue to climb the ladder to the point where you are a controller or a CFO or a director like that. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. This is the truth. Okay. Why does it feel like there are 500 applicants for every remote senior accountant role right now? Because everyone wants to work remote. 2026 and 2025, the market, it was very competitive, right? You have to stand out to be able to actually get the interview and ultimately get the job. I mean, the senior accountant roles themselves, that I don't know if I have an answer for. I think that generally speaking, higher level finance leaders, so there was not a lot of movement within the private equity CFO roles because the hold times are longer, right? Deals aren't moving as much. Although at the end of 2025, I think they started to open up a little bit, which is super exciting for 26. 2020. So for the other roles, when you get higher up, there's only so many opportunities available to begin with. The rest, it's funny when you operate in a role like mine, you just see people basically playing. It's too late on a Friday for me to remember what it is. Musical chairs. So a lot of those financial leaders, you'll see them. Everybody swaps roles, right? So CFO at company A goes to CFO at company B, CFO at company B, CFO goes to company A, right? They kind of move from one opportunity to the next. And so when companies aren't being sold, when people aren't moving, it stops that flow of musical chairs. So anybody whose role gets eliminated, whose role gets moved to another area, part of town, different location, geography, they have nowhere to go now because no one else is moving in that cycle. With the remote accounting roles, with 500 applicants, a big part of it too, like part of those 500 applicants, they are just not qualified to actually get that job. So like part of it's don't worry about it. It's not like there are really good 500 senior accountants applying to it. Trust me, I see the applications come through on the jobs that we post. Not everyone's going to be a fit for that. The other part is just the competitive nature of wanting to get into that work-life balance where you're at home and remote. And the other part of that is naturally accounting and finance teams in general just normally run lean. So there is a demand for accountants, don't get me wrong, but when teams operate lean like that, you're competing with people that are at jobs they want to get out of, people that are unemployed, and then the unqualified people that are applying for the job. So that is why you see so many applicants overall. Okay. Is it true that you have to switch jobs every 2 to 3 years to get a significant pay bump? No, not necessarily. Depends on the company you're working at, right? If they're a really good organization, they want to retain talent, you can definitely still do good. If you jump too many times, you will start getting questions as to why you're moving a lot. It is an outdated mindset. I think a lot of employers that we work with, they're not asking that question as much. And if you're working with a recruiter on anything, like just walk through them and help them understand your moves to make it make sense and have a logical story. If you're just, obviously no one would ever say like, hey, I moved every 3 years because I wanted more money. That's just that's a great way to not get hired. But it doesn't, you don't have to move every 2 to 3 years to get a significant pay bump. You can still get a good pay bump at the company that you're at if you're making meaningful impact and if you're having the right conversations with your boss and your boss's boss, and making sure that like you are actively involved in the business and they know that you are making these improvements. Is the return to office movement killing the talent pipeline in accounting? Fantastic question. If a company is requiring that people are in the office 5 days a week, what I'm seeing is that it is harder for them to find the best talent. The best talents work in hybrid. You could say fully remote as well, but honestly, when I talk to really high level performers and people like really moving the needle with their company, they want to be in the office at least 3 or 4 days a week, at least 2 to 3 days a week. So if I'm a company and I'm hiring my accountant, I'd be advertising it as hybrid. Right. The question's kind of phrased that way. So like from that perspective, it's killing the talent pipeline if you're trying to get the best of the best to work for you. If you're requiring people to come in the office 5 days a week. Okay. What is a standard bonus percentage for a controller versus a VP of finance? Standards. Well, controller and VP of finance are very different. So I'm going to go very broad because, again, it depends on the size of the organization, depends on the ownership structure. So broadly speaking, controller standard, I would say 15 to 30%, VP of finance, probably the same thing, honestly. It depends. It really depends on the size of company and whatnot. So that's a tough one for me to answer. Ooh, should you ever stay at a company after they match a competing offer? You can. I've seen it work out fewer times than I've seen that person get replaced after they accept the counter offer. Right? So it's just when you go and give resignation and they give you a counter offer and you take it, they now know you're looking. They know you're unhappy. Like why it shouldn't take you getting an offer from another company for them to realize your value to the organization and like what you want. So you can absolutely stay. I'm thinking of one person in mind that did stay after a counter and it worked out. But that's one person out of how many people that I've talked to in the 8 years or about to be 8 years of me doing this. So generally speaking, it's not great to stay, but it can work out in certain circumstances. I'm trying to think of what that circumstance would be because I'm sure that's like, I don't want to give an answer and then not give the caveat, but I'd have to think about the different scenarios where it would actually be applicable. My general statement is it's just there's plenty of research out there that just show when someone takes the counteroffer, they're not there a certain number of days later. All right, this will be the last one here we've gotten through. This is 38 or so. While working in corporate, I don't know about that. This is a very interesting, good question. How do I compete with offshore teams that are doing the same work for 25% of my salary? You reskill, right? So look at what the offshore teams are doing specifically, right? Your company's outsourcing probably the mundane work, the blocking and tackling, the AP, the AR, the general accounting work. How can you upskill yourself to start thinking about things from a higher level standpoint, back to understanding the business itself, and unlock insights that you can work with the rest of the different functional leaders, your team, your CEO, upgrade yourself to do things that the offshoring team aren't doing, right? Make it so that, this question is relevant and that you're not doing the same work that they are. So we're going to end it there. We're at the hour here. Still got 10 questions here. So I'll probably repost the questionnaire. Hopefully this is something that adds value. I want to be able to answer questions live and provide more thoughts on it. I'm realizing that I turned off one of my lights earlier, so hopefully this light was enough. But this will be saved to the YouTube. I'll probably repurpose some of these clips. If you guys have any additional questions, I'm going to post it in the same questionnaire, that link. But as always, reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me there. I'm always happy to have conversations.